The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds of Fort Blackwood as Lavra Kozlov wiped sweat from her brow. Her black hair pulled back in a regulation bun that had already come loose from hours of equipment maintenance. At 24 years old, 5 feet 3 inches with calloused hands from countless hours cleaning weapons and hauling gear, she looked nothing like the warriors depicted in the recruitment videos that played on loop in the base cafeteria. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. By noon that day, she would become the first woman in military history to single-handedly neutralize an entire enemy platoon using nothing but tactical brilliance and skills no one knew she possessed. Lavra Kozlov had been assigned to the 47th Support Battalion at Fort Blackwood for 18 months, and in all that time, she had never once set foot in the combat training facilities. Her world consisted of equipment maintenance bays, supply warehouses, and the endless paperwork that kept a military base running. While other soldiers practiced urban warfare and tactical maneuvers, Lavra spent her days cataloging ammunition, maintaining communication equipment, and ensuring that combat units had everything they needed to train effectively. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had enlisted with dreams of becoming a frontline soldier, inspired by stories of her grandfather who had fought in World War II, but the military had other plans. Despite scoring in the top 5% on her tactical assessments and physical fitness tests, Lavra had been channeled into logistics and support roles. Women serve best behind the lines, Colonel Morrison had told her during her assignment review. Support personnel are the backbone of our operations. What Colonel Morrison didn't know was that Lavra had been using her security clearance and off-duty hours to study every aspect of combat operations she could access. She memorized tactical manuals, studied enemy movement patterns from classified briefings, and even snuck into empty training facilities at night to practice combat scenarios on the computer simulators. Her fellow logistics personnel saw her as dedicated but unremarkable, just another support staffer who took her job seriously. Laura's small quarters were lined with books on military strategy, combat psychology, and battlefield tactics. She had taught herself to read terrain maps with the precision of a reconnaissance specialist and could identify enemy equipment and capabilities from grainy surveillance photos. But this knowledge remained hidden, locked away in the mind of someone the military establishment viewed as fundamentally unsuited for combat roles. The morning of July 15th started like any other. Lavra arrived at the equipment bay at 0530 hours, 2 hours before her official shift began. She preferred the quiet of early morning, when she could work without the constant chatter of her colleagues questioning why she seemed so invested in understanding the tactical applications of the equipment she maintained. As she ran diagnostics on communication radios, she memorized their frequencies and range capabilities. While cleaning sniper rifles, she studied their ballistic characteristics and optimal deployment scenarios. Sergeant Davis found her there at 0700, already halfway through the day's maintenance checklist. "Kozlov, you know you don't need to be here until 0730, right?" he said, grabbing a coffee from the break room. "The war isn't going to end because you showed up early to clean radios." Lavra smiled politely. Sergeant Davis was a good supervisor. But like everyone else, he saw her dedication as admirable but ultimately pointless. "Just like to stay ahead of things, Sergeant," she replied, continuing her work on a tactical communication system that most support personnel treated as just another piece of equipment to maintain. What they didn't understand was that Lavra wasn't just maintaining equipment, she was learning it. Every radio frequency, every weapon specification, every piece of tactical gear that passed through her hands became part of an ever-growing database of military knowledge that she carried in her head. She understood the capabilities and limitations of every piece of equipment used by both friendly and enemy forces, knowledge that would typically take years of frontline experience to acquire. As the morning progressed, Lavra moved through her routine with practiced efficiency. She checked ammunition counts, verified equipment serial numbers, and prepared gear packages for training exercises she would never be allowed to participate in. The 3rd Infantry Company was scheduled for advanced combat training that afternoon, urban warfare scenarios designed to test their ability to operate in hostile territory against a well-equipped enemy force. Lavra had read the training briefings. Of course, her security clearance gave her access to most operational documents, and she made it her business to understand every exercise conducted on base. The 3rd Infantry would face a simulated enemy force using standard insurgent tactics, improvised explosive devices, sniper attacks, and coordinated ambushes designed to test their tactical flexibility and unit cohesion. At 11:30 hours, Lavra was finishing her equipment inventory when the base alarm system erupted in a series of sharp blasts that made her blood freeze. It wasn't the scheduled drill signal they heard every Tuesday. This was the real alert, the one that meant Fort Blackwood was under actual attack. The attack sirens wailed across Fort Blackwood as Lavra dropped her clipboard and ran toward the command center, her mind already shifting into a tactical mode that few people knew existed. While other support personnel looked around in confusion, unsure of protocols for a real emergency, Laura's 18 months of secret study had prepared her for exactly this moment. She reached the command center just as Colonel Morrison was receiving the initial situation report. Through the partly open door, she could hear fragments of the briefing that made her stomach clench with understanding. Hostile force. Approximately 30 combatants. Zid. Seized the East Training Compound. 3 RD and Infantry Company. Surrounded and cut off from reinforcement. Lavra pressed herself against the wall outside the command center, using skills she'd learned from studying reconnaissance techniques to gather intelligence without being detected. The situation was worse than she'd initially thought. The 3rd Infantry Company, the same unit scheduled for training that afternoon, had been conducting their urban warfare exercise when real enemy forces had infiltrated the base and turned the training scenario into an actual combat situation. "Sir, the enemy has taken control of the training facility's communication towers," reported Major Stevens, the base intelligence officer. "They're jamming our standard frequencies and have positioned snipers to prevent any conventional rescue attempt. The 3rd Infantry is trapped in a building complex with limited ammunition and no way to call for backup." Colonel Morrison's voice carried the weight of impossible choices. "How long until reinforcements arrive from Fort Carson?" "Minimum 4 hours, sir. The enemy chose their timing well. Most of our combat-ready units are deployed or in transit. We have support personnel and trainees, but nothing approaching the tactical capability needed for a direct assault against 30 entrenched hostiles." Laura's mind raced through the tactical implications. She had studied the East Training Compound extensively, both from official blueprints and from her unauthorized nighttime explorations of the facility. She knew every building, every sight line, every potential approach route. More importantly, she understood the enemy's most likely positions and defensive strategies based on the tactical manuals she'd memorized. The irony of the situation struck her like a physical blow. The military's most detailed knowledge of the training compound's tactical characteristics existed in the mind of someone they considered unsuitable for combat operations, while colonels and majors struggled to develop rescue plans for a facility they visited only for inspection tours. Lavra could walk through the compound blindfolded and identify optimal firing positions from memory. She slipped away from the command center and made her way to the communications equipment bay, where she had unrestricted access to the sophisticated radio system she maintained daily. Using her detailed knowledge of military frequencies and encryption protocols, Lavra began monitoring the tactical communications between the trapped 3rd Infantry and the enemy forces surrounding them. What she heard confirmed her worst fears. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Lieutenant Cooper, the ranking officer with the trapped unit, was trying to coordinate a defense with 17 soldiers armed with training ammunition and limited supplies. The enemy forces were using professional military tactics, suggesting they weren't random insurgents, but trained soldiers with detailed knowledge of American military procedures. More troubling was the enemy's communication discipline. They were using encrypted radio frequencies and tactical call signs that suggested significant intelligence preparation. This wasn't a spontaneous attack, it was a carefully planned operation, designed to capture or eliminate an entire American infantry company while testing base security responses. Lavra pulled up the tactical mapping software on her maintenance terminal, overlaying the compound's layout with probable enemy positions based on the radio intercepts she was monitoring. Her analysis revealed a pattern that made her blood run cold. The enemy wasn't just holding defensive positions, they were systematically moving to eliminate the trapped Americans one position at a time. She grabbed the secure phone and tried to reach the command center, but the lines were jammed with emergency communications. Every available officer was coordinating with higher headquarters, trying to organize a response that wouldn't arrive in time to save the 3rd Infantry Company. Lavra stared at the tactical display on her screen, seeing solutions that apparently no one else could see. The enemy had made one critical mistake in their positioning. They had assumed any rescue attempt would come from the main base along predictable routes. But Lavra knew alternative approaches through maintenance tunnels and utility corridors that didn't appear on standard tactical maps. More importantly, her detailed knowledge of the compound's communication systems revealed a vulnerability the enemy hadn't considered. The same jamming equipment they were using to isolate the trapped Americans could be turned against them if someone could reach the central communications hub undetected. As she studied the tactical situation, Lavra realized she possessed something more valuable than combat experience. She had intimate knowledge of every system, every weapon, and every piece of equipment on the base, combined with theoretical tactical knowledge that most frontline soldiers never acquired. She could see opportunities and solutions that escaped even experienced combat officers, because they were thinking like warriors, while she was thinking like an engineer. The question wasn't whether she could develop a plan to rescue the 3rd Infantry Company. The question was whether anyone would listen to tactical advice from a logistics specialist, and whether she had the courage to act on knowledge she wasn't supposed to possess. Lavra looked at the clock on her terminal. 11:47 hours. At the current rate of enemy advancement, the trapped Americans had perhaps 90 minutes before their position became completely untenable. 90 minutes to convince the command structure to trust a support specialist with a rescue plan that violated every conventional military doctrine about women in combat. Laura's hands trembled as she stared at the tactical display, watching red dots representing enemy positions slowly tighten around the building where 17 American soldiers waited for a rescue that might never come. Today was supposed to be different for entirely personal reasons. She had submitted her transfer request to Fort Carson 3 weeks ago, hoping to start fresh at a base where her tactical knowledge might be valued. The approval paperwork sat in her locker, already signed and dated for next Monday. She had planned to spend this afternoon cleaning out her quarters and saying goodbye to the few colleagues who had bothered to learn her name. By evening, she would have been on a bus heading toward Colorado and what she hoped would be a chance to prove herself in a more progressive military environment. Instead, she found herself possessing the only tactical solution to a crisis that could cost 17 lives. The irony cut deep. After 18 months of being told that women belonged in support roles, that her gender made her unsuitable for tactical operations, Lavra had discovered that her exclusion from combat training had actually given her a unique advantage. While combat soldiers learned to think tactically about specific scenarios, her support role had required her to understand the broader systems that made military operations possible. She knew the base's infrastructure better than any combat officer, because she maintained it. She understood equipment capabilities better than frontline soldiers, because she serviced them. Most importantly, she had studied theoretical tactics without the constraints of conventional military thinking, because no one had ever told her how she was supposed to approach tactical problems. Lavra pulled up her transfer orders on the computer screen, looking at the official seal that would carry her away from Fort Blackwood forever. In 6 days, she would be someone else's problem. Another logistics specialist who asked too many questions and showed too much interest in operations beyond her assigned role. The thought of leaving felt different, now not like escape, but like abandonment. She grabbed her secure phone and tried one more time to reach the command center. But Colonel Morrison's aide dismissed her without even asking what she wanted. "Ma'am, unless this is a critical equipment failure, we're not taking calls from support personnel right now," the aide said before hanging up. Lavra stared at the phone, feeling the familiar sting of dismissal she'd experienced countless times over the past 18 months. But this time was different. This time, people were going to die because the command structure refused to consider that tactical expertise might exist outside their predetermined categories. She looked at her computer terminal, where intercept communications continued to paint an increasingly desperate picture. Lieutenant Cooper's last transmission had been brief. Down to 12 rounds per man. Enemy advancing on south position. Request immediate assistance. The timestamp showed that message was 6 minutes old, and there had been no communication since Lavra made a decision that would either end her military career or transform it entirely. She grabbed her gear bag and headed for the armory, using her security clearance to access equipment that support personnel were technically authorized to maintain, but never expected to use operationally. The M4 carbine felt familiar in her hands despite her lack of official combat training. She had field stripped and maintained hundreds of these weapons, understanding their mechanical operation and ballistic characteristics better than soldiers who fired them regularly but never serviced them. She selected ammunition, basic medical supplies, and a tactical radio configured for the frequency she'd been monitoring. As she prepared to leave the base through a maintenance gate that wouldn't appear on official patrol routes, Lavra caught her reflection in a darkened window. She still looked like the logistics specialist who had arrived for work that morning. Regulation uniform, equipment bag, nothing suggesting she was about to attempt a solo rescue mission against 30 enemy combatants. The transformation wasn't visible yet, but she could feel it beginning inside her mind. For 18 months, she had absorbed tactical knowledge while accepting that she would never be allowed to apply it. Now faced with a situation where conventional military doctrine offered no solutions, her unconventional background had become her greatest asset. Lavra checked her watch. 12:03 hours. The 3rd Infantry Company had perhaps 75 minutes before their position became completely hopeless. She shouldered her equipment bag and walked toward the maintenance gate, leaving behind the safety of her assigned role and stepping into a tactical situation that would either prove her capabilities or cost her life. Behind her, the command center continued coordinating responses that would arrive too late. Ahead of her lay 2 miles of hostile territory, 30 enemy combatants, and 17 American soldiers who had no idea that their rescue was coming in the form of a 5'3" logistics specialist who had never fired a shot in combat. As she reached the perimeter fence, Lavra realized she was no longer thinking about her transfer to Fort Carson or her frustrations with military gender policies. She was thinking about sightlines, approach routes, and tactical opportunities. The theoretical knowledge she'd accumulated in secret was transforming into operational planning. and for the first time in her military career, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Lavra reached the outer perimeter of the training compound at 12:15 hours, moving through maintenance corridors and utility tunnels that had been excluded from the base's official tactical maps. Her route had taken her through the infrastructure, underworld of Fort Blackwood steam tunnels, electrical conduits, and service passages that connected every major building on the installation. Knowledge gained from 18 months of equipment maintenance had become reconnaissance intelligence that no combat manual could provide. She positioned herself behind a utility, building approximately 400 meters from the main compound, using binoculars to conduct her first visual assessment of the tactical situation. What she saw confirmed her worst fears while revealing opportunities that conventional assault planning would have missed entirely. The enemy force was indeed professional grade, equipped with military weapons and using textbook small unit tactics to maintain control of the compound. They had positioned snipers on the two highest buildings, established overlapping fields of fire to prevent conventional approach routes, and created a defensive perimeter that would require significant casualties to breach using standard military doctrine. But Lavra wasn't thinking like a standard military planner. Her maintenance background allowed her to see the compound as an interconnected system of buildings, utilities, and infrastructure, rather than simply as terrain to be captured. Every building was connected to others through service tunnels she had mapped during routine equipment installations. Every position the enemy held was dependent on power, communications, and structural systems she understood in detail. Through her binoculars, she could see muzzle flashes from the building where the 3rd Infantry Company had taken shelter. Enemy was conducting systematic suppression fire, keeping the Americans pinned down while advancing their positions incrementally. It was a professional operation designed to eliminate the trapped soldiers while minimizing enemy casualties, exactly the kind of tactical efficiency that suggested extensive planning and intelligence preparation. Laura's radio crackled with intercepted enemy communications, confirming that the hostile force was operating with detailed knowledge of American military procedures. They knew response times for reinforcements, understood base security protocols, and had timed their operation to exploit the exact moment when Fort Blackwood was most vulnerable to attack. More troubling was their apparent knowledge of the 3rd Infantry's capabilities and limitations. The enemy was countering American tactical moves before they were fully implemented, suggesting either real-time intelligence or previous surveillance of training exercises. This wasn't a random attack, it was a carefully orchestrated operation designed to capture or eliminate an entire American infantry company while testing base defenses. Lavra checked her tactical radio and heard Lieutenant Cooper's increasingly desperate situation reports. "Base, this is Thunder 6. We have wounded, limited ammunition, and enemy forces advancing on multiple fronts. Request immediate close air support or ground reinforcement. Over." The response from base command carried the weight of bureaucratic impossibility. Thunder 6. Be advised, air support is unavailable due to weather conditions at regional bases. Ground reinforcement ETA is 3 hours minimum. Maintain defensive positions and conserve ammunition. Over. 3 hours. Lavra looked at her watch and calculated the tactical mathematics that every soldier in the compound understood. At the current rate of enemy advancement, the 3rd Infantry Company had perhaps 45 minutes before their defensive positions became completely untenable. The enemy was using classic siege tactics, systematic pressure designed to force the Americans into increasingly desperate defensive moves until their position collapsed entirely. But the enemy had made assumptions about rescue attempts that Laura's unconventional background allowed her to challenge. They had positioned their forces to counter attacks from predictable directions, using conventional military vehicles and standard assault tactics. They weren't prepared for a single infiltrator with detailed knowledge of the compound's hidden infrastructure, and complete understanding of every system they were depending on. To maintain their tactical advantage, Lavra began moving toward the compound through a drainage system that connected to the building's basement levels. Her route would take her underneath the enemy's defensive perimeter, allowing her to approach the trapped Americans from a direction that conventional military planning would never consider. But first, she needed to neutralize the advantages that made the enemy force so effective. The hostile forces were depending on three critical systems to maintain their tactical superiority: communications equipment for coordination, electrical power for their surveillance systems, and elevated positions for sniper coverage. Lavra understood all three systems better than the engineers who had installed them, and she carried equipment that would allow her to manipulate each one in ways the enemy couldn't anticipate or counter. As she crawled through the drainage tunnel toward the compound's central utility hub, Lavra realized she was about to test 18 months of theoretical tactical knowledge against 30 professional soldiers in a scenario where failure would cost 18 lives, including her own. The transformation from support specialist to combat operative was no longer theoretical. It was happening in real time, underground, in a drainage system that would either deliver her to tactical victory or become her tomb. Her radio crackled with another transmission from Lieutenant Cooper. Base, Thunder 6. Enemy forces have breached our outer perimeter. We're falling back to the main building, but we're down to approximately 8 rounds per man. This is our final defensive position. Over. Lavra checked her watch. 12:34 hours. She had approximately 30 minutes to single-handedly neutralize a professional enemy force and rescue 17 American soldiers using nothing but maintenance knowledge, theoretical tactics, and equipment she wasn't officially qualified to operate. Lavra emerged from the drainage system into the basement of the compound's central utility building, her uniform soaked with condensation and her heart pounding from 30 minutes of crawling through service tunnels that had never been designed for human passage. Above her, she could hear the steady crack of gunfire and occasional explosions that marked the systematic destruction of the 3rd Infantry's defensive positions. The utility building housed the compound's primary electrical distribution system, communication relay equipment, and water pumping stations infrastructure that the enemy was depending on to maintain their tactical advantage. Lavra had serviced these systems dozens of times, understanding their vulnerabilities and interdependencies better than the engineers who had designed them. She pulled out her tactical radio and switched to the emergency frequency that connected directly to the base command center. Base, this is Support Specialist Kozlov. I am in position to assist with the rescue of Thunder 6. Request permission to proceed with tactical operation. Over. The response came immediately, crackling with disbelief and irritation. Kozlov. What the hell are you doing off base? Return to your assigned position immediately. We have no authorization for support personnel to engage in combat operations. Over. Lavra stared at the radio, feeling 18 months of frustration crystallize into a moment of absolute clarity. Base, with respect. Thunder 6 has approximately 25 minutes before their position becomes completely untenable. I have tactical knowledge of this compound and can neutralize the enemy threat. Request permission to proceed. Over. Colonel Morrison's voice cut through the static, carrying the authority of command and the weight of impossible decisions. Specialist Kozlov, you are not qualified for combat operations. You are ordered to withdraw immediately and return to base. Any engagement with enemy forces will result in court-martial proceedings. Over. Lavra looked at the electrical distribution panel in front of her, its array of switches and circuits representing the power grid that kept the enemy's surveillance systems operational. She thought about Lieutenant Cooper and 16 other soldiers who were about to die because military doctrine prohibited the one person with tactical knowledge of their situation from acting to save them. Base, understood. Kozlov out. She switched off the radio and removed the battery, ensuring that her position couldn't be tracked or her actions countermanded. For the first time in her military career, Lovra was operating completely outside the chain of command, relying on her own judgment and theoretical knowledge to guide decisions that would determine whether 17 Americans lived or died. She opened her equipment bag and pulled out tools that she used daily for electrical maintenance but had never considered as tactical weapons. Wire cutters, voltage meters, electrical tape, and diagnostic equipment became implements of warfare in the hands of someone who understood the compound's infrastructure better than anyone else on the base. Lovra began with the electrical system, systematically cutting power to buildings where enemy snipers had established positions, while maintaining electricity to areas controlled by friendly forces. Each circuit she disabled eliminated enemy advantages while preserving American capabilities, a tactical approach that no conventional military doctrine had ever considered, because it required intimate knowledge of building-level infrastructure. Her next target was the communication relay system that allowed enemy forces to coordinate their attacks. Lovra accessed the central communications hub using maintenance codes she had memorized during routine equipment servicing. Instead of simply destroying the equipment, she reprogrammed the system to redirect enemy communications through frequencies she could monitor while establishing a secure channel for the trapped Americans to communicate with each other. As she worked, Lovra could hear the gunfire above growing more intense. The enemy was conducting what sounded like a final assault on the 3rd Infantry's position, probably recognizing that their tactical window was closing as base security prepared more comprehensive responses. Every second of delay increased the chances that she would complete her infrastructure sabotage, only to find that the Americans were already dead. She checked her watch. 12:48 hours. 17 minutes until Lieutenant Cooper's estimated position collapse. Lovra shouldered her equipment bag and began moving through basement corridors toward the building where the Americans had taken their final defensive position. Her route would take her underneath the enemy's defensive perimeter, but first she needed to eliminate the sniper positions that made any conventional rescue attempt impossible. Lovra pulled out her tactical radio and switched to the frequency she had established for secure communications with the trapped Americans. Thunder 6, this is Ghost. I am in position to provide assistance. Maintain your current defensive positions and prepare for coordinated tactical support. Over. The response came immediately, filled with confusion and desperate hope. Ghost. This is Thunder 6. Who are you and what's your position? We have no friendlies in the area. Over. Lovra smiled grimly as she climbed toward the first sniper position. Thunder 6. I'm someone who knows this compound better than the people attacking it. Stand by for tactical support. Ghost out. Lovra reached the second floor of the utility building through a maintenance stairwell that connected to the network of service corridors running throughout the compound. From this position, she had a clear view of the tactical situation that made her blood run cold with understanding of how desperate the Americans' position had become. Through a maintenance access window, she could see Lieutenant Cooper's remaining soldiers pressed into the ground floor of Building C, their defensive perimeter reduced to a single room with windows facing 3 directions. Enemy muzzle flashes indicated at least 15 hostiles positioned to maintain continuous suppression fire while assault teams maneuvered to final positions. But what made Laura's tactical assessment truly horrifying was her recognition of the enemy's ultimate objective. This wasn't a simple capture or elimination mission. They were conducting what military intelligence would classify as a demonstration operation, designed to prove that American military installations were vulnerable to sophisticated attack. She pulled out her binoculars and studied the enemy positions with the analytical precision her maintenance background had taught her. The hostile forces weren't just trying to kill the trapped Americans. They were documenting the entire operation with cameras and recording equipment. This was intended to be propaganda, proof that American soldiers could be systematically eliminated while their own command structure remained helpless to intervene. Laura's radio crackled with an intercepted enemy transmission that confirmed her worst fears. Bravo team, maintain documentation of American defensive failures. Command wants complete tactical analysis for training purposes. Estimated completion of demonstration in 12 minutes. 12 minutes. The enemy wasn't just planning to kill Lieutenant Cooper and his soldiers. They intended to do it slowly, methodically, while recording every detail for future use against American forces. The 17 trapped soldiers weren't just combat casualties. They were about to become examples used to train enemy forces in techniques for systematically destroying American military units. She switched to the secure frequency she had established for communicating with the Americans. Thunder 6, this is Ghost. Sitrep on casualties and ammunition status, over. Lieutenant Cooper's voice carried exhaustion and growing desperation. Ghost, we have 3 wounded, 1 critical. Ammunition down to approximately 4 rounds per man. Enemy forces appear to be preparing for final assault. We estimate 8 to 10 minutes before our position becomes completely untenable, over. Lavra checked her equipment and calculated the tactical mathematics that would determine whether her rescue attempt succeeded or simply added her name to the casualty list. She had 1 M4 carbine with 6 magazines, basic medical supplies, and intimate knowledge of built-in systems that the enemy couldn't anticipate or counter. Against 15 professional soldiers in prepared positions, those advantages would have to be enough, but the stakes extended far beyond the 17 Americans trapped in building. Silova realized that her success or failure would determine whether the military establishment's assumptions about women in combat were validated or shattered forever. If she succeeded, it would prove that tactical capability existed independent of gender and conventional training. If she failed, her death would be used to justify continued exclusion of women from combat roles. More immediately, Lavra understood that the enemy's propaganda objectives made this rescue operation critically important to American military morale. If the demonstration succeeded, footage of American soldiers being systematically eliminated while their own command structure remained helpless would be used for recruitment, training, and psychological warfare against American forces worldwide. She moved through service corridors toward the first sniper position, carrying with her not just the hope of saving 17 lives, but the responsibility of proving that her 18 months of excluded study had prepared her for tactical challenges that conventional military training hadn't anticipated. Laura's radio crackled with another enemy transmission. Alpha Team, begin final documentation phase. Demonstrate American tactical failures for training analysis. Estimated completion in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. She switched back to the American frequency. Thunder 6, this is Ghost. I am beginning tactical support operations. When you hear electrical systems cycling, prepare for coordinated movement to improved positions. Trust the plan and follow my directions exactly, over. Ghost, we don't know who you are or what resources you have available. Can you provide tactical assessment of your capabilities? Over. Lavra smiled grimly as she prepared to engage her first target. Thunder 6, I'm about to prove that the most dangerous enemy soldier is someone who knows the battlefield better than anyone expects. Stand by for tactical demonstration. Ghost out. She checked her watch. 12:51 hours. 9 minutes to save 17 American lives and prove that tactical expertise transcended every assumption the military establishment had made about gender, training, and combat capability. Lavra Kozlov was about to discover whether 18 months of secret preparation had made her into the soldier she'd always believed she could become. Lavra crouched in the service corridor outside the first sniper position, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. Every theoretical principle she had studied was about to be tested against professional soldiers. who would kill her without hesitation if they detected her presence. The transformation from support specialist to combat operative was no longer a possibility, it was happening in real time. In a darkened hallway where 18 months of secret preparation would determine whether she lived or died, she had studied this exact scenario dozens of times in tactical manuals, but reading about close quarters combat was entirely different from preparing to execute it against trained enemies. Laura's heart pounded as she reviewed the sequence of actions that would either eliminate the first threat or alert the entire enemy force to her presence. The sniper position was located in a corner office that provided excellent sight lines over the compound while remaining concealed from conventional assault routes. Lavra had accessed this room countless times during routine maintenance of communication equipment, understanding its layout and vulnerabilities better than whoever had selected it as a tactical position. She pulled out tools from her equipment: bag wire cutters, electrical tape, and a small mirror used for inspecting hard-to-reach equipment components. These maintenance implements were about to become weapons in the hands of someone who understood the building's infrastructure better than its current occupants. Lavra used the mirror to observe the sniper's position through a ventilation grate that connected to the building's AVK system. She could see one enemy soldier with a scoped rifle covering the approaches to Building C, while a second hostile-operated radio equipment for coordinating with other positions. Both men were focused on their assigned targets, confident that their elevated position made them immune to counterattack. They were wrong. Laura's maintenance access allowed her to approach from a direction that conventional military tactics would never consider. Through the building's utility infrastructure, she carefully removed the ventilation grate using techniques learned from years of accessing restricted spaces for equipment repair. Her movement was deliberate and silent, guided by muscle memory from countless hours of working in cramped, mechanical spaces where any noise could indicate equipment failure. Lavra crawled through the velvet tuck toward the sniper position, carrying her M4 carbine and the improvised tactical equipment she had assembled from maintenance supplies. The space was barely large enough for her 5'3" frame, an advantage that her exclusion from combat roles had inadvertently created. Larger soldiers would never have been able to navigate the approach route she was using. As she reached the final access point, Lavra could hear the enemy soldiers discussing their tactical situation in accented English that confirmed these weren't random insurgents but trained foreign operatives conducting a sophisticated military operation against American forces. Alpha 2, maintain overwatch on American position. Bravo team reports final assault begins in 6 minutes. Document elimination sequence for training analysis, 6 minutes. Lavra realized the enemy timeline was accelerating faster than she had calculated. Lieutenant Cooper and his soldiers had perhaps 4 minutes before the final assault began, and she needed to eliminate multiple sniper positions before the Americans could attempt any defensive movement. She positioned herself at the ventilation access point that would put her directly behind the radio operator, calculating angles and distances with the precision her maintenance background had taught her for working in confined spaces. Laura's theoretical tactical knowledge, combined with practical experience in three-dimensional problem-solving to create combat capabilities that no military training program could have provided. Lavra took a deep breath and made the transition from 18 months of theoretical preparation to active combat operations. She removed the final ventilation grate and dropped silently into the sniper position, her M4 carbine trained on targets who had no idea their impregnable position had been compromised by someone they would never have considered a threat. "Don't move," she whispered, her voice carrying the authority of someone who understood exactly how much damage her weapon could inflict at close range. "Drop your weapons and place your hands behind your heads." The radio operator spun toward her voice, reaching for a sidearm that would never clear its holster. Laura's training took over, not formal military instruction, but hundreds of hours spent studying combat techniques and weapon employment that she had never expected to use operationally. Her first shots were precise and professional, eliminating both targets before they could alert other enemy positions or complete their assigned mission. The suppressed gunfire was barely audible outside the room, maintaining the tactical surprise that would be essential for her success against the remaining enemy forces. Laura secured the enemy weapons and radio equipment using her communication knowledge to monitor enemy frequencies while accessing their tactical information. What she discovered made her realize that her rescue operation was even more critical than she had originally understood. The enemy force wasn't just conducting a demonstration operation, they were testing American response capabilities for a larger attack planned against multiple military installations. The systematic elimination of the 3rd Infantry Company was intended to provide tactical intelligence for future operations that could threaten thousands of American soldiers. She checked her watch. 12:56 hours. 4 minutes until the enemy's final assault, and she had eliminated one of 6 sniper positions. Laura shouldered the captured equipment and prepared to move to the next target, carrying with her the growing realization that her success could prevent not just 17 deaths, but a broader campaign of attacks against American military forces. Laura moved through the building's service corridors toward the 2nd sniper position, carrying captured enemy equipment that provided crucial intelligence about the hostile forces' capabilities and intentions. The radio intercepts revealed coordination between 6 enemy teams, suggesting a total force larger than the 30 combatants she had initially estimated. More troubling was their professional communication discipline and tactical precision, confirming that this was a military operation conducted by trained soldiers rather than insurgent fighters. She reached the utility closet that provided access to the 2nd sniper position through the building's internal maintenance pathways. This approach would be more challenging because the enemy had positioned their marksmen in a room with limited access points and excellent visibility of surrounding areas. Laura's infrastructure knowledge would have to overcome superior tactical positioning and professional military training. As she prepared to breach the 2nd position, her captured radio crackled with enemy communications that made her blood freeze. Command Alpha 3. American reinforcements approaching compound perimeter. Estimated arrival in 12 minutes. Request permission to accelerate final phase. 12 minutes until reinforcements arrived, but only 3 minutes until the enemy's final assault on Lieutenant Cooper's position. Laura realized she was operating in an impossibly narrow tactical window where success required perfect timing and flawless execution of techniques she had never practiced under combat conditions. The response from enemy command carried the weight of calculated ruthlessness. Alpha 3. Permission granted. Complete demonstration phase immediately. Document American tactical failures and prepare for extraction. Laura checked her own tactical radio and switched to the frequency she had established with the trapped Americans. Thunder 6, this is Ghost. Enemy is accelerating final assault. You have approximately 2 minutes before they begin coordinated attack on your position. Prepare for immediate tactical support. Lieutenant Cooper's response carried desperate professionalism. Ghost, we're down to 3 rounds per man and have 1 soldier who needs immediate medical evacuation. Whatever tactical support you can provide, we need it now. Laura studied the building layout through the maintenance access point, calculating approach routes and engagement angles with the systematic precision her engineering background had taught her. The 2nd sniper position controlled the primary escape route from Building C, making its elimination critical for any rescue attempt. But as she prepared to engage the 2nd target, Laura discovered that her first success had created unexpected complications. The enemy had noticed a loss of communication from Alpha 2 and were conducting security sweeps to identify potential threats. Her tactical advantage was disappearing as the hostile force adapted to her presence. She could hear Movement in the corridors above her as enemy soldiers began systematic searches of areas they had previously considered secure. Laura's window for using surprise tactics was closing rapidly, forcing her to choose between maintaining stealth and accepting direct combat engagements. She wasn't trained to survive. The captured radio provided real-time intelligence about enemy search patterns, but it also revealed that her presence was forcing them to accelerate their timeline for eliminating the trapped Americans. Every minute she delayed increased the chances that Lieutenant Cooper's soldiers would be overrun. Before she could neutralize enough threats to mount an effective rescue, Lavra made a tactical decision that violated every principle of conventional military doctrine. Instead of methodically eliminating sniper positions one at a time, she would attempt to neutralize multiple targets simultaneously. Using her knowledge of the building's infrastructure systems, she accessed the compound's electrical control panel through a maintenance corridor that connected to all 6 sniper positions. Using her detailed understanding of the power grid, Lavra began systematically cutting electricity to enemy positions, while maintaining power to areas controlled by friendly forces. Each circuit she disabled eliminated enemy advantages while preserving American capabilities. The effect was immediate and devastating to enemy coordination. Sniper positions that depended on electrical systems for communication and surveillance were suddenly isolated from their command structure, while tactical lighting that had provided the Americans with defensive advantages remained operational. Laura's radio crackled with confused enemy communications as their carefully coordinated attack plan began to collapse. Command: we have lost communication with multiple positions. Electrical systems appear to be failing systematically. But her infrastructure sabotage had also alerted the enemy to her location and capabilities. She could hear boots on the floors above as hostile forces began converging on the utility areas where she was operating. Laura's tactical knowledge had given her initial advantages, but now she faced direct combat against professional soldiers who understood her general location and were moving to eliminate her. She checked her ammunition 5 magazines remaining and calculated the tactical mathematics of her situation. 6 enemy teams were conducting coordinated searches for her position, while 17 American soldiers waited for rescue in a building that would be overrun in approximately 90 seconds. Lavra grabbed her equipment and prepared to abandon stealth tactics for direct combat operations, carrying with her the realization that 18 months of theoretical preparation would now be tested against trained soldiers in close quarters. Fighting where her maintenance background provided no advantages, her radio crackled with Lieutenant Cooper's final transmission. Ghost, enemy forces are advancing on our position. This is our last stand. If you're going to provide tactical support, we need it in the next 60 seconds. 60 seconds. Lavra checked her watch. 12:59 hours. She had 1 minute to prove that a logistics specialist could outfight professional soldiers using nothing but theoretical knowledge and equipment she wasn't trained to operate. Lavra abandoned the utility corridors and burst into the main hallway of the second floor, her M4 carbine raised and her tactical training taking over as enemy soldiers converged on her position from 3 directions. The stealth phase of her operation was over. Now she faced direct combat against professional fighters who had been trained for exactly this type of close quarters engagement. The first enemy soldier rounded the corner at the north end of the hallway, his weapon already trained on Laura's position. Her response was instinctive, guided by hundreds of hours studying combat techniques and weapon employment that she had never expected to use operationally. Her shots were precise and effective, eliminating the threat before he could engage her effectively, but her muzzle flash had revealed her position to other enemy forces throughout the building. Lavra could hear boots on staircases and coordinated movement as hostile soldiers began systematic sweeps designed to corner her in areas where her infrastructure knowledge provided no tactical advantages. Her captured radio crackled with enemy Communications that revealed the true scope of the complication she faced. All units. Priority target located on second floor, East Wing. Subject appears to be American Special Operations conducting sabotage operations. Use extreme caution. Target has eliminated multiple positions and disrupted our communication systems. Special Operations. The enemy had concluded that only elite American forces could have penetrated their security and eliminated trained soldiers with such precision. Lavra realized that her success was creating expectations she couldn't possibly meet. They were preparing to engage someone with capabilities far beyond what a logistics specialist could actually provide. She moved through the building using maintenance passages that connected different floors and sections, but the enemy had adapted to her tactics by positioning soldiers to cover areas they had previously ignored. Laura's advantage in building knowledge was being systematically eliminated as hostile forces learned to think like maintenance personnel rather than conventional combat soldiers. The tactical situation deteriorated further when she reached the third floor and discovered that the enemy had positioned their command element in the same communications center she had planned to use for coordinating the American rescue. Her route to the most critical target was blocked by the enemy's most capable fighters, armed with equipment that gave them significant advantages in direct engagement. Lavra accessed her tactical radio and tried to contact Lieutenant Cooper, but received only static in response. Either the Americans' communication equipment had been damaged, or they were no longer in position to respond to calls for coordination. The possibility that she might be conducting a rescue operation for soldiers who were already dead made her tactical calculations even more desperate. She switched to the enemy frequency and heard communications that confirmed her worst fears. About the American position. Bravo team, American resistance has collapsed. Subjects are attempting to surrender. Follow protocol for demonstration documentation. Surrender. Lavra realized that her delay in neutralizing sniper positions had allowed the enemy to overrun Lieutenant Cooper's defensive position while she was engaged in direct combat. The 17 soldiers she had risked everything to save were now prisoners, facing execution for propaganda purposes. But the enemy transmission also revealed a crucial piece of tactical intelligence. The Americans weren't dead, they were captured, which meant Lavra still had an opportunity to mount a rescue operation. However, the situation had transformed from a defensive support mission into an assault operation against fortified positions where the enemy held both terrain advantages and hostages. Lavra checked her ammunition, 3 magazines remaining, against an unknown number of enemy soldiers holding prepared positions with American prisoners as leverage. Her tactical resources were completely inadequate for a conventional rescue attempt. She needed to find approaches that the enemy couldn't anticipate or counter using standard military doctrine. Her maintenance background provided one possibility that conventional military training would never consider. The compound's fire suppression system included emergency protocols that could flood specific areas with suppressant chemicals while maintaining life support in designated safe zones. If she could access the system's controls and modify its deployment patterns, Lavra might be able to incapacitate enemy forces while protecting American prisoners. She moved toward the building's central mechanical room through service corridors that were becoming increasingly dangerous as enemy search teams learned to cover areas they had previously ignored. Every step carried the risk of encountering hostile soldiers who were now actively hunting her. With professional coordination and superior numbers, Laura's radio crackled with an intercepted transmission that made her tactical situation even more complicated. Command, this is Overwatch. American reinforcements have reached compound perimeter and are establishing assault positions. Estimated engagement in 8 minutes. 8 minutes until American reinforcements arrived to find either a successful rescue operation or a massacre. That would provide the enemy with exactly the propaganda victory they had planned from the beginning. Lavra realized that her tactical window was now measured in minutes, rather than the hours she had originally calculated. But the approaching reinforcements also created an opportunity for coordination that could transform her solo rescue attempt into a synchronized operation. If she could re-establish communication with friendly forces and provide real-time intelligence about enemy positions and American prisoner locations, Laura's infrastructure knowledge could guide a conventional assault that would have much higher chances of success. She accessed the building's communication system through a maintenance terminal that connected to external transmission equipment. Using her detailed knowledge of military frequencies and encryption protocols, Lavra began establishing contact with the approaching American forces while simultaneously monitoring enemy communications about their defensive preparations. The enemy was preparing for a conventional assault using tactics designed to maximize American casualties while ensuring that prisoner executions could be completed if their position became untenable. Laura's tactical intelligence was about to become critical for preventing both military disaster and propaganda victory for hostile forces who had demonstrated sophisticated understanding of American military capabilities and limitations. Lavra successfully established communication with the approaching American reinforcements, providing detailed tactical intelligence about enemy positions, prisoner locations, and building vulnerabilities that conventional assault planning could never have anticipated. Major Harrison, commanding the rescue force, responded with professional appreciation for intelligence that transformed an impossible rescue operation into a coordinated tactical strike. "Ghost, this is Rescue 6. Your intelligence is invaluable. We're positioning assets based on your assessment of enemy defensive preparations. Can you maintain overwatch and provide real-time updates during our assault?" Over. Lavra checked her tactical situation and realized she had achieved something unprecedented in her military career: recognition as a valuable combat asset by experienced officers who were depending on her expertise for mission success. "Rescue 6, this is Ghost. I can provide tactical support and real-time intelligence. Standing by for coordination with your assault teams." Over. The coordination felt like vindication of 18 months of excluded study and theoretical preparation. Laura's infrastructure knowledge was guiding professional soldiers in tactical operations that could save 17 American lives while eliminating a sophisticated enemy threat. For the first time since enlisting, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged in the military structure. She moved to an observation position that provided excellent sight lines over the compound while remaining concealed from enemy forces, who were preparing their defenses for conventional assault. Using captured enemy equipment and her own tactical radio, Lavra began providing detailed updates about hostile movement patterns and defensive adjustments. "Rescue 6, enemy is repositioning heavy weapons to counter your approach from the south. Recommend approach through eastern maintenance corridors that I can guide you through. Also, American prisoners are being held in Building C, ground floor, northwest corner room." The assault began with precision strikes against enemy positions that Lavra had identified through her reconnaissance operations. American forces moved through approach routes she had mapped during 18 months of maintenance operations, using building vulnerabilities that conventional military planning would never have discovered. Everything proceeded according to tactical perfection. Enemy defensive positions were systematically eliminated by American forces who understood terrain advantages better than the hostile soldiers who had selected them. Communication intercepts confirmed that enemy command was surprised by American tactical knowledge that seemed to anticipate every defensive measure they had prepared. Lavra watched through binoculars as American soldiers advanced through the compound using routes and techniques that her intelligence had made possible. The rescue operation was succeeding beyond anything she had dared hope, proving that her theoretical knowledge could contribute to tactical success at the highest levels of military operations. But as American forces reached the building where prisoners were held, Laura's radio crackled with an intercepted enemy transmission that made her blood freeze with horror. Execute contingency protocol. Detonate all packages. Repeat, execute contingency protocol immediately. Contingency protocol. Laura realized with crushing certainty that the enemy had prepared for the possibility of rescue operations by rigging the entire compound with explosive devices designed to eliminate both American prisoners and rescue forces. Her tactical intelligence had guided American soldiers into a trap that would kill everyone she had risked her life to save. She keyed her radio frantically. Rescue 6. Abort assault immediately. Enemy has explosive devices throughout the compound. This is a trap designed to eliminate rescue forces along with prisoners. But her warning came too late. American soldiers were already inside buildings that had been rigged with demolition. Charges moving through corridors that would become killing zones when the enemy triggered their contingency plan. Laura's successful intelligence operation had become the mechanism for a tactical disaster that would kill more Americans than the original hostage situation. The first explosions began in Building A, where Laura had guided American forces to attack what she believed were enemy command positions. The detonations were systematic and coordinated, designed to collapse entire sections of the compound while trapping rescue forces inside. Structures that became tombs rather than tactical objectives. Laura watched in horror as her successful rescue operation transformed into a catastrophic failure that would result in casualties far beyond the original 17 prisoners. Her tactical knowledge had been used against American forces by an enemy who had anticipated that infrastructure specialists might be deployed to support conventional assault operations. Her radio crackled with desperate calls from American forces trapped in buildings that were systematically exploding around them. Rescue 6 to all units. Compound is rigged with explosive devices. Repeat, this is a trap. All units execute immediate evacuation. But evacuation was impossible for soldiers trapped inside collapsing buildings, and the systematic nature of the explosions suggested that enemy forces had planned this contingency from the beginning. Laura's intelligence had been accurate, but incomplete. She had identified enemy positions without recognizing that those positions were designed to lure rescue forces into kill zones. She stared at the compound as explosions continued to destroy buildings she had guided American soldiers into, realizing that her success had become the mechanism for a tactical disaster that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The logistics specialist who had dreamed of proving herself in combat operations had instead provided the intelligence that killed the soldiers she had tried to save. Laura checked her watch. 14 hours. In 15 minutes, she had transformed from support personnel into combat operative, successfully conducted reconnaissance and tactical operations, coordinated with professional soldiers, and guided them into a trap that would result in casualties beyond anything the enemy's original plan could have achieved. The false victory was complete. Her tactical success had become strategic disaster, proving that infrastructure knowledge without combat experience was inadequate for understanding enemy capabilities and intentions. As she watched American soldiers die in buildings she had guided them into, Laura realized that the military's assumptions about her limitations might have been tragically correct. As Laura watched the systematic destruction of the compound through her binoculars, something in the pattern of explosions struck her as wrong. Her maintenance background had taught her to analyze system failures with methodical precision, and the demolition sequence didn't match the random timing she would expect from emergency destruction protocols. The buildings were exploding in a specific order that preserved certain structures while eliminating others. More troubling was the fact that the explosive charges seemed to be shaped to direct debris away from particular areas, suggesting demolition planning that went far beyond simple booby traps or contingency protocols. Laura pulled out the enemy RADI. She had captured and monitored their communications with growing recognition that the tactical situation was more complex than anyone had understood. Instead of the panicked coordination she expected from forces under assault, enemy communications remained calm and methodical, discussing extraction procedures and documentation protocols that suggested they were following a predetermined plan. Bravo Team, Phase 3 demolition is complete. American rescue forces have been eliminated as planned. Begin documentation of tactical success for analysis. Extraction in 10 minutes. Phase 3. Lara realized with cold certainty that the enemy operation had always been designed around multiple phases, with the rescue attempt being an anticipated component rather than an unexpected complication. The hostile forces hadn't just planned to capture and eliminate American soldiers, they had planned to lure rescue forces into a larger trap that would provide even more valuable intelligence about American tactical capabilities. She switched frequencies and began monitoring American military communications, discovering that the disaster was even more comprehensive than she had realized. The explosions had been timed to occur during shift changes at Fort Blackwood, maximizing confusion and preventing effective coordination of emergency responses. Enemy forces had demonstrated sophisticated understanding of American military procedures, timing their operation to exploit bureaucratic vulnerabilities as well as tactical ones. But as Lara analyzed the enemy communications more carefully, she began to notice inconsistencies that suggested something deeper was happening. The hostile forces were discussing extraction procedures that required significantly more time than would be safe if they were actually under assault by American reinforcements. Their timeline suggested they weren't worried about American tactical responses, which was impossible unless they possessed intelligence about response capabilities that went far beyond what foreign operatives should have been able to acquire. Lara switched back to the American frequency and heard Major Harrison coordinating what remained of his rescue force. All units, pull back to perimeter positions. We have multiple casualties and need immediate medical evacuation. This operation has been compromised at the highest levels. Laura's blood went cold as she realized what Major Harrison was suggesting. The enemy's detailed knowledge of American procedures, their perfect timing of the operation, and their confidence about extraction protocols all pointed to intelligence support that could only have come from inside the American military structure. She began cross-referencing the enemy communications she had been monitoring with her knowledge of Fort Blackwood's personnel and procedures, looking for patterns that might reveal how foreign operatives had acquired such detailed tactical intelligence. What she discovered made her stomach clench with understanding of betrayal that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. The enemy forces possessed detailed information about personnel assignments, training schedules, and security protocols that would have been available only to someone with high-level access to base operations. More specifically, their knowledge of building layouts and infrastructure systems matched information that would have been available through maintenance and engineering databases, exactly the type of classified material that Laura's own security clearance gave her access to. Laura's mind raced through the implications of what she was discovering. Someone with access to the same infrastructure, knowledge that had made her tactically valuable, was providing that information to enemy forces. The sophisticated attack wasn't just foreign military operation. It was espionage supported by an American traitor who understood Fort Blackwood's vulnerabilities better than its own security personnel. She pulled out her tactical radio and attempted to contact Major Harrison with intelligence that could transform the failed rescue operation into a counterintelligence investigation. But her transmission was immediately jammed by sophisticated equipment that suggested enemy forces were monitoring American frequencies and actively preventing communication between surviving American personnel. The jamming capabilities confirmed her suspicions about insider support. Foreign operatives wouldn't have had access to the specific frequencies and encryption protocols required to disrupt American military communications so effectively. Someone was providing real-time technical assistance that went far beyond tactical intelligence. Laura realized she was facing an enemy force that possessed not just superior numbers and positioning, but comprehensive knowledge of American capabilities and limitations provided by a traitor whose identity remained unknown. Her tactical knowledge might be the only advantage American forces still possessed, but only if she could find a way to apply it against enemies who understood Fort Blackwood's systems almost as well as she did. She checked her watch. 18 hours. The enemy extraction was scheduled to begin in 6 minutes, which meant they would soon disappear with tactical intelligence about American capabilities that could be used to plan future operations against other military installations. Unless she could identify and neutralize the source of their intelligence advantage, the disaster at Fort Blackwood would become the first in a series of attacks that could devastate American military readiness. Laura shouldered her equipment and began moving toward the compound's communications center, carrying with her the realization that her mission had evolved beyond rescuing trapped Americans to preventing a broader intelligence catastrophe that could threaten national security. Laura reached the compound's central communications facility through a service tunnel that had survived the systematic demolitions, emerging into a basement area where she could hear enemy forces preparing for extraction procedures that would carry their intelligence victory beyond American reach. The moral complexity of her situation struck her like a physical blow as she realized the impossible choices that would determine not just her own survival, but the future security of American military installations. Through ventilation grates, she could see the surviving members of the 3rd Infantry Company being prepared for transportation as prisoners. Lieutenant Cooper and 11 other Americans were bound and blindfolded, clearly intended to serve as propaganda assets for enemy forces who had demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare techniques. Their faces showed the exhaustion and despair of soldiers who had expected rescue but found only deeper captivity. But Laura's tactical analysis revealed an even more disturbing truth about her moral dilemma. The enemy extraction plan included procedures for eliminating American prisoners once they reached transportation vehicles, suggesting that the soldiers she was trying to save were intended to be murdered regardless of whether rescue attempts succeeded or failed. The hostile forces were using the Americans as leverage during extraction, after which they would become liabilities to be eliminated. Laura checked her ammunition, 2 magazines remaining, against an unknown number of enemy soldiers preparing for extraction while holding American prisoners as human shields. Her tactical resources were completely inadequate for a conventional rescue attempt. Any direct assault would likely result in prisoner executions before she could neutralize enough threats to mount an effective operation. Her captured radio crackled with enemy communications that revealed the true scope of the moral crossroads she faced. Command, intelligence package is complete. American tactical procedures have been documented extensively. Prisoner transportation will begin in 4 minutes, with disposal scheduled upon reaching extraction point Alpha. Disposal. Laura realized that her choice wasn't between rescue and failure. It was between attempting a desperate operation that might save some Americans while alerting the enemy to her survival, or allowing the prisoners to be transported and murdered while she pursued the traitor whose intelligence support had made the entire operation possible. The utilitarian calculation was brutal but clear. 12 American soldiers would die regardless of her immediate actions, but stopping the intelligence leak could prevent future operations that might kill hundreds or thousands of American personnel. Her tactical knowledge could serve either immediate emotional imperatives or broader strategic necessity, but not both. Laura's radio crackled with an intercepted transmission that made her moral choice even more complicated. Base. This is Colonel Morrison. Be advised that Specialist Kozlov is a WOL and may be compromised. All personnel should consider her a potential security risk and report any contact immediately. Colonel Morrison was actively undermining her credibility and operational Security, suggesting either bureaucratic incompetence or deliberate sabotage of American operations. Laura realized that her commanding officer might be the source of the intelligence leak that had enabled enemy forces to anticipate and counter every American tactical response. The possibility that Colonel Morrison was the traitor transformed her moral calculation completely. If her own commanding officer was providing intelligence to enemy forces, then following military protocol would simply alert the traitor to her survival and tactical knowledge. Laura's only chance of preventing future attacks was to operate completely outside the chain of command while gathering evidence that could expose the intelligence leak. She pulled out her tactical radio and made a decision that violated every principle of military discipline she had been taught. Instead of attempting to contact American forces through official channels, Laura switched to emergency frequencies that Colonel Morrison wouldn't be monitoring and began transmitting intelligence directly to higher headquarters using protocols she had learned during her unauthorized study of communication procedures. This is Support Specialist Kozlov transmitting tactical intelligence to Fort Carson Command. I have evidence of intelligence leak at Fort Blackwood enabling enemy operations. Request immediate counterintelligence investigation of senior personnel with access to infrastructure databases. The response came immediately from Major General Stevens, whose authority superseded everyone at Fort Blackwood. Specialist Kozlov, your transmission is being recorded as evidence. Provide all available intelligence about enemy capabilities and potential insider support. You are authorized to operate independently until counterintelligence personnel arrive. Independent operation. Laura realized she had just received authorization to conduct whatever tactical action she deemed necessary to prevent intelligence catastrophe, regardless of conventional military doctrine about women in combat or support personnel limitations. For the first time in her military career, she was being treated as a complete soldier rather than a specialist with arbitrary restrictions. But authorization didn't resolve her moral dilemma about the American prisoners who would be murdered. While she pursued broader strategic objectives, Laura stared at Lieutenant Cooper and his soldiers through the ventilation grate, seeing faces that trusted her to attempt rescue regardless of tactical impossibility or personal cost. She checked her watch. 13:21 hours. 3 minutes until enemy extraction began, carrying away both American prisoners and tactical intelligence that could enable future attacks. Laura shouldered her weapon and prepared to make choices that would define not just her military career, but her understanding of duty, sacrifice, and the moral calculations that separated soldiers from killers. The moral crossroads was complete. Save 12 Americans who would die anyway, or stop intelligence leak that could kill thousands in future operations. Laura Kozlov was about to discover whether 18 months of excluded preparation had taught her to think like a strategist or react like a hero. Laura made a decision that transcended the impossible choice between immediate heroism and strategic necessity. Instead of choosing between saving the prisoners or stopping the intelligence leak, she would do both using her unique combination of infrastructure knowledge, tactical training, and desperate innovation to achieve what conventional military doctrine considered impossible. She accessed the compound's fire suppression system through a maintenance terminal that connected to emergency protocols designed to protect human life during facility disasters. Using her detailed understanding of building systems, Laura began modifying the deployment patterns to flood specific areas with suppressant chemicals while maintaining life support in designated safe zones where American prisoners were being held. The chemical suppression would incapacitate enemy forces without killing American prisoners, but only if Laura could coordinate the deployment with precise tactical timing that required her to be in multiple locations simultaneously. She needed to trigger the system, neutralize enemy communications to prevent countermeasures, and eliminate guards holding the Americans all within a 60-second window that would determine whether her plan succeeded or killed everyone in The compound. Laura moved through service corridors toward the communication center, carrying captured enemy equipment and improvised devices assembled from maintenance supplies. Her plan required her to transform building safety systems into tactical weapons, while simultaneously conducting direct combat operations against professional soldiers who would kill her without hesitation if they detected her presence. She reached the communications hub at 13:22 hours, finding 3 enemy soldiers preparing equipment for extraction while monitoring American military frequencies to ensure their operation remained undetected. Laura's approach through ventilation systems put her directly above targets, who had no idea their impregnable position was about to be compromised by someone they would never have considered a threat. Her assault was swift and professional, eliminating all 3 targets before they could alert other enemy forces or complete their assigned mission. Laura secured their equipment and accessed the communication systems that connected to Fort Blackwood's entire infrastructure network, giving her control over everything from electrical power to emergency protocols. Using her captured enemy radio, Laura transmitted false extraction orders that would move hostile forces away from prisoner-holding areas, while positioning them in zones where chemical suppression would be most effective. Her detailed knowledge of enemy communication protocols, gained from hours of monitoring their frequencies, allowed her to mimic their tactical language and timing perfectly. All units, this is command. Extract prisoners through southern corridor. New extraction point Alpha 7 requires immediate movement. Confirm receipt and compliance. The response was immediate and professional. Command, units moving to new extraction point. Prisoner movement begins now. Laura watched through security monitors as enemy forces began relocating American prisoners exactly as she had planned, moving them toward areas where fire suppression systems would protect them, while exposing hostile soldiers to incapacitating chemical deployment. Her tactical deception was working, but success required perfect timing of systems she had never used operationally. She initiated the modified fire suppression sequence, watching as suppressant chemicals flooded corridors and rooms where enemy forces were positioned while maintaining safe atmospheric conditions in areas holding American prisoners. The effect was immediate and comprehensive. Hostile soldiers throughout the compound were incapacitated by chemicals designed to extinguish fires but equally effective at eliminating human threats. Laura grabbed her remaining equipment and moved toward the prisoner-holding area, where she found Lieutenant Cooper and 11 other Americans alive but weakened from their captivity. Her rescue had succeeded, but the tactical situation remained critical because enemy extraction vehicles were approaching the compound with reinforcements that could overwhelm her defensive position. Lieutenant Cooper, this is Specialist Kozlov. I'm here to get you out, but we have limited time before enemy reinforcements arrive. Cooper stared at her with confusion and growing recognition. Kozlov, you're the logistics specialist. How did you? He stopped as he saw her tactical equipment and professional bearing. How many people are with you? Just me, sir, but we need to move immediately. Laura led the rescued Americans through infrastructure routes she had mapped. During 18 months of maintenance operations, using building systems and service corridors that enemy forces couldn't anticipate or counter, her knowledge of Fort Blackwood's hidden pathways allowed the group to reach the perimeter without encountering hostile resistance. As they emerged from the compound, Laura could see American reinforcements establishing defensive positions to counter the approaching enemy extraction vehicles. Major General Stevens met them at the perimeter, his expression showing professional respect that Laura had never experienced from senior officers. Specialist Kozlov, your tactical intelligence prevented a significant security breach. The counterintelligence investigation will begin immediately, but your evidence about insider support has already been forwarded to appropriate authorities. 6 months later, Laura stood in Colonel Morrison's former office, now hers reviewing security protocols that would prevent future intelligence breaches at Fort Blackwood. The investigation had revealed that Morrison had been providing tactical information to foreign operatives for over 2 years, compromising multiple operations and endangering countless American personnel. Laura's promotion to major had come with assignment as Fort Blackwood's new intelligence and security officer, a position that utilized both her infrastructure knowledge and proven tactical capabilities. The military had finally recognized that combat effectiveness existed independent of gender and conventional training backgrounds. Dr. Martinez, the same officer who had once told her that women served best behind the lines, approached her desk with a situation report that required her tactical expertise. "Major Kozlov, we have a developing situation that needs someone who understands both infrastructure vulnerabilities and enemy tactics." Lavra smiled as she reviewed the tactical assessment, remembering the morning when she had been nothing more than a logistics specialist whose capabilities were ignored by everyone around her. "Dr. Martinez, I've learned that the most dangerous soldiers are often the ones nobody expects to fight." That sunny morning had transformed her from an overlooked support specialist into a combat leader, whose unconventional background had proven invaluable when conventional military doctrine failed. Lavra Kozlov had single-handedly taken down an entire enemy platoon while saving 12 American lives and exposing an intelligence breach that threatened national security. Sometimes, the most important battles were fought by people who weren't supposed to be warriors at all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.